I think for a lot of artists, details can seem so important because I think when a lot of people look at drawings, details are what immediately impress you. Like, for example, a lot of people get dazzled by the details in a drawing, and you hear people say things all the time like, that drawing's amazing. Oh my goodness, look at the detail that artist did. So I totally understand this feeling that you want to get the details to look really good. But actually, I think it's not thinking about the details at all for a long time while you're drawing that makes you draw faster.
You make that focal point through the detail. The questions bring up that point of art does take time, but how do you want to use that time? And most of it should be spent in the planning stages, making the preliminary sketches, doing thumbnail work, and then the details is that like final layer on top.
If you do a really good job of setting up a strong, solid composition with really solid, simple shapes that probably look like nothing like blobs for a long time, but you really map out the composition and you really plan out the layout and you progressively move towards the detail incrementally, that's much faster than when people want to get to the detail right away.
Yeah. Because there's that myth that, like you said, it's the details that make the art great. But no, that's like when somebody,
it's not at all.
When somebody looks at a good drawing and says like, oh, the detail's great, that's like driving a car and being like, man, the tires are doing all this work. It's like, no, there's so much more that goes into it.
Another thing is that when people are starting like with the details instead of doing the structure first, they find that things aren't lined up quite right because they don't have that structure in there. Right. So they have to go back and fix everything like 100 times and everything looks a little bit off.
Time. So that's what's making things really like making your clock get bigger and bigger as far as how much time you're spending.
Well, I think you end up backtracking a lot because like if I'm doing a portrait of somebody and I draw an eye and I make it super detailed and then 15 minutes later, I realized, oh my goodness, that eye is too high. I got to move it down. Now I got to erase the whole thing and redo it. And so that's where I think thumbnail sketches are so important because that's where you work out those problems, you troubleshoot, you anticipate all those things. And I think the thing is a lot of students, they don't want to do thumbnails because they think, oh, that's extra work. It takes so long to make the actual drawing. Why would I want to add that extra time to do those sketches?
And I feel like the thumbnails, too, are such a universal thing. It doesn't really matter which area of art that you're into. Like, it could be illustration or comics. It can be painting. It can be
even sculpture.
Or like industrial design. Like, anything requires that first step of, like, drawing out what you think it's going to look like before, like, you know, putting in the details of an eye.
And, like, the thumbnails are that time to really play around and really tweak that composition. Like,
they're really low stress.
I see so many paintings that are good, but they're not great. And it's like, oh, if you just tweaked these things, then the composition would flow much better. The focal point of the image would be much more apparent. And thumbnails are the time to discover that.
Yeah, you can't do it once the painting's done.
No, I mean, once you've gotten to that point, once that paint's on the canvas, it's hard to go back and make those changes. And what I find about thumbnails is making a big fundamental compositional change is easy because you're just sketching with pencil. You're like, oh, I'll just move that head up 5 inches. It's not a big deal. It's really quick and fast to make those changes. But once you've launched into that, it's like you're too invested already. And then you don't want to change it because you go, oh, I already worked on this painting for 6 hours. I don't want to change it. And so I think what I say to students a lot is if you want to make big changes, make them early. Do them early in the process. You don't want to figure out 20 hours into a painting that you should have put the head on the left-hand side instead. I think a lot of people spend way too much time judging their work as they make it. And so what they end up doing is stressing themselves out too much. And so what I do a lot is I just draw, and I don't think at all. Like I just do it, like almost like I'm running a sprint. Because when you're running a sprint, you can't intellectualize what your feet are doing. You can't think, I think I should turn my toes this way.
You trip.
That wouldn't work. So with a sprint, you just do it as fast as you can. You don't think. And I do that a lot with drawing too, where I just kind of work a lot and then I step back maybe the next day. Because I think what happens is people do the drawing, they go, oh no, the nose. And then they pick at the nose and they're drawing the nose for 5 hours. And then they go, oh no, the eye. So I think if you can work without judging yourself, that's super helpful.
Yeah, and then you produce the work much faster. Like for me, I call these like accidental breaks when like I'm painting and then you lean back and like, how does that Nope, that's an accidental break, because then you're not thinking of, like, you start thinking about it and you really kind of bog yourself down. And it adds to the time that it takes to make the piece.
Oh yeah, I think what we're getting at here is that there's a place and time for stepping back and judging, because that is an integral part of making the work. You do have to like constantly kind of check in with yourself and make sure you're like going in the direction that you want to be going, but you need to give yourself a day. I like to have several pieces going on at once so that I don't really have to take like a break. I can go and work on something else, so then I can go back to the previous piece and see it with new eyes.
Right. And I think it also helps not to linger in one area for too long, because what I've seen a lot is people get really fussy about, well, this has to be like this. And so they're just erasing it, drawing it, erasing it, drawing it. And it's like almost like you're spending more time erasing than you are actually drawing. And so I think what helps is leave those mistakes. If you're doing a drawing and there's a couple lines that you don't like, just let them go. Don't go in and feel you need to correct everything along the way. And sometimes I find after a little while, I don't even notice those lines, or they get covered up, and I didn't even have to erase them. Yeah, I mean, one of the tricks that I've kind of done whenever I've taught foundation drawing is I have students draw with material that you cannot erase with. And so it forces them to react to the marks, and you've got to move on. You have no choice. You can't go back and erase.
That was actually a huge thing that I got out of your class. Like before your class, I was sketching with pencils, and I was horrible at making my thumbnails and like getting exactly what I wanted, because I was always erasing, trying to get the line quite right. But after your class, I started sketching with markers. It came out so much better, because once it's on there, I don't have to worry about it anymore. Like just go on to the next thing. I can always make a new drawing if it comes out really that bad. And it never comes out that bad.
Right, it's never that tragic, usually. Sorry, I know. I touched the lav mic.